Welcome to episode 13, Construction Nation. This is Sue Dyer, your host of Construction Dream Team, where I interview industry leaders and experts so you can learn how to build your construction dream team based on OPE, other people's experiences. The shortest way to success is to learn from others who've already been there and done that. If you want to receive Construction Dream Team on your phone automatically every week, please head on over to iTunes or Stitcher or anywhere that you can subscribe for a podcast. We'd love to get a 5-star rating. This gives us more visibility in the search engine so more people from Construction Nation can find us. I am so excited about our guest today. Randy Iwasaki is Executive Director of the Contra Costa Transportation Agency. Before coming to CCTA in 2010, Randy served as the director of the Department of Transportation here in California, also known as Caltrans. And that's where I met Randy. And he's such a great leader and a visionary. And I'm so excited to have him here today. Randy's also a licensed civil engineer, and he is absolutely a pioneer in transportation and has won all sorts of awards recognizing that. He is one of the leaders in the world in autonomous vehicles. So welcome, Randy, to Construction Dream Team.
Thank you, Sue. It's great to be here.
So I'd like to start off by having you maybe tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming the executive director for Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Yeah, I'll do that. I went to college. I'll start in college. I went to college at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And the only reason why I mentioned that is because they have this motto called learn by doing. And I think that really helped jumpstart my career from the perspective of when I got hired by Caltrans in the early 80s, they sent me out to surveying, and I really didn't like surveying in college. But when I got out there, they always try to play little games with you on the plumb bob needs to be adjusted and things like that. And having actually done the work, they really couldn't fool me on some of the tricks they were trying to play on me as an entry-level civil engineer. And so I started there at Caltrans as an entry-level engineer, went through a rotation program, and I left 27 years later as the director of the department under Governor Schwarzenegger. And I think that the 27 years I spent at Caltrans really helped get me prepared to be the executive director for the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. You have to deal with people, you deal with contracts, you have to manage large sums of money, you have to interact with legislators, both on the state, federal, and local levels. I think it was just a great training ground for me to make me maybe a little bit more successful in the job that I have now than I would have if I had come from somewhere else.
That is so exciting to see the journey. And so I love everyone to be able to see that everyone has this journey that starts off with modest beginnings, and then you emerge into maybe where you're supposed to be. And we hear great things about CCTA all the time, and you as a leader. So what do you think is your greatest strength as a leader?
I think that, first of all, what we do here at CCTA is we hire really, really good people. And so we spend a lot of time in the hiring process. We look for people that have the ability to make decisions, the entrepreneurial spirit, people that are adaptive change. They can deal with change and risk-taking. And then when we hire them, we give them opportunity. And I think that my strength that I have, at least here currently, is I think I'm a pretty good motivator. I set some standards for decision-making, for example. If it makes us better partners, if it makes us provide better customer service, if it makes us more efficient and it's innovative, go ahead and say yes to whatever the issue is and push that topic through to the end. And if it doesn't quite work out right, I'll take the blame. But if it works out right, they start to really understand how to make a decision, the fruits of the decision making, and it really motivates them into doing other great things. And the other thing, the strength that we have here that allows me to be a good leader is we have a really diverse group of people. And so they're willing to do things from a different perspective. And so I don't have to say how to get from point A to point B exactly. I just say, here's where we want to go. We want to be at point B. And then they choose the process and the path that they take in order to get us to point B. And if there's issues associated with that, we make minor adjustments. But overall, we're 20-member person. We're 20 people that make up Contra Costa Transportation Authority, and we manage a multi-billion-dollar suite of projects and programs. And so I know that's a long-winded way of answering your probably a simple question, but I mean, we have both the people and we also have a motivation. And I think that we have a great environment for motivation, a great environment for innovation. And you can see that coming from the outside.
Yeah, that's what I sort of picked up on. You're creating an atmosphere that allows for the innovation to emerge and creativity. So that's a wonderful leadership trick. So any advice you'd have for people on if they wanted to start to create that, say they're not in an environment that's like that, and they have the ability to lead at least some component, could just be a team, could be a unit, could be maybe the whole organization. How would you start to create that atmosphere of innovation?
The leader has to have the ability to give up the process and more lead by motivation. And so if you want to go from point A to point B, you've done that yourself many times. Sometimes it's hard to let somebody find out how to get from point A to point B themselves. And you have to give that work up. And that's sometimes very hard to do. But if you can master that, and like I mentioned earlier, if you have great people, it makes that process a lot better. And when you sit back and you watch it, it really amazes you, and you learn to let go of more. And so I used to do a lot of this myself during my career, but what I've learned is other people are doing is I sit back and watch them. I'm just amazed at the creativity that they possess and the different ways of doing business that I may not have done it that way, but it gets done. And many times it's even more innovative than the process that I would have chosen. And so I'm amazed at that. And I think that we as leaders, if you're starting out, think about that as how do you motivate people to do it their way, not your way? And then really embrace that process.
That's so cool. That is very awesome. And I hope everyone will just think about one thing this week you could do that might be a little different and allow for that motivation and creativity to emerge. I know you're a visionary and thought leader in the autonomous vehicles world. And I know that you have a vision and you've made that vision happen. I've watched it. So how important do you think vision is for your organization?
Well, vision is very important to any organization. You have to be able to articulate to your team what direction you're headed. So in our case, we want to be the best transportation agency in the world. And so we really strive to do that. And there's many components to being the best. And we're competitive, very competitive group. So we're always working on that. But it's important to have a vision to say we want to head in this direction. We want to change the world. We want to implement autonomous vehicles, not for the sake of implementing the latest bright, shiny object. We actually are working very hard on trying to promote and implement autonomous vehicles because it fits into one of the facets of transportation that we're looking at, and that is trying to find ways of implementing a vision zero, reducing the fatality rate to zero, because there's far too many people killed on our roadways in the United States every year, and we want to try to be part of the fix to that. And then we're also testing the technology because we have an underserved portion of our communities that don't have access to transportation, whether they're elderly, they're disabled, or they just choose not to own a car, can't afford a car. We're trying to provide mobility because that's really if we're going to be the best transportation agency in the world, we have to figure these things out. And so that's really what we do, these kind of, I call them crazy things for transportation agencies our size. But we do that not because we just want to want to test these vehicles, but we really do it because we want to try to solve problems.
That's a great answer, Randy, because it really shows that vision is beyond just the organization. And it gives us a little bit of insight into your vision for CCTA. What is your vision for CCTA?
As I mentioned before, we want to be the best or one of the best transportation agencies. And I think that our people actually are really striving to do that. They're always trying to find new ways of doing business. They're trying to become more efficient, as transparent as possible, and then provide opportunities for others. And so that's really our vision for CCTA.
How did you come up with a vision that was so compelling? What led to being able to do that? I see so many leaders sort of uninspired, maybe would be the way to look at it. How did you come to the point where you were inspired to be able to see beyond what is maybe the normal way of looking at things?
We actually work very hard on developing and implementing our innovation program and our vision for Contra Costa Transportation Authority. And one of the issues is if you don't get buy-in from your team, you can have the best vision in the world and no one's going to know about it because people they don't pay attention to it. And so we work really hard on internal communication. We work very hard on teamwork because we know that if we're going to be the best transportation agency, we have to have some components internally. The other thing that we suffer as a small agency is many times we don't have a good ladder for succession. So we're working hard on our succession planning. And lastly, what we try to do here is when we develop our vision is talk about change. Because if we do things the same way we've done them in the past over and over again, and we want different results, that's probably not going to happen. And so we're always working on 4 critical things here at CCTA: internal communication, teamwork, succession planning, and change. We want to make sure that we have the right people in the right location. When we have a vacancy at CCTA, we sit around as a team and we talk about, okay, what do we need in the area of project delivery? What do we need in the area of finance? What do we need in the area of planning? And are we going to get the right person in the position with the right skill set to help advance our vision into the future? And so it's a multifaceted kind of an approach to implementing your vision and developing that vision. If you develop a vision nobody buys in, you're not going to have a very good vision. And so we spend some time internally making sure that everybody understands the direction that we're headed, how we make decisions, and what we're working on.
I heard too that you have kind of a unique approach to even pulling in your constituencies, your stakeholders to participate in your processes. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
We had a update of our countywide transportation plan and started in 2014. I think was signed in 2017. And we got together and said our normal way of gathering input from the public is a requirement. If you use federal funds, we usually have a couple of open houses in a couple of locations in Contra Costa County, and we get maybe 40 people per open house to get their input. 10 of them usually are your consultants, and another 30 or so are mad at you. They don't really give you good information. They're there to complain because they have an opportunity to complain. But we don't ever hear from the other 1.1 million people in Contra Costa County that may have some good points or may want to ask a question. And so we presented that to the team. Lindsay Willis is our Director of External Affairs. She knows all about social media, how to use websites and things like that, which I don't. And so she took the lead and developed a comprehensive plan of engaging the public. And so instead of using the open house, which we still did because that's a requirement, so we had 4 open houses in each of the 4 subregions of Contra Costa, let's call it East, West, North, and South. But then she went the extra step, once again, innovating, and developed a website, Keep Contra Costa Moving, and you got an allocation of Coco coins, Contra Costa coins, 10 Coco coins. And when you logged in, we knew your IP, so we knew your location. So if you were from another county, we didn't count. But if you're from Contra Costa County and you were located there, then we went ahead and counted your budget. So you allocate, let's say 10 coins, you get 10 coins, 10 coins into, I don't like potholes. So you put 10 coins in potholes. Well, all this information is aggregated up. And then we did a telephone town hall, electronic telephone town hall, where we would answer questions live for an hour and a half, and you could dial in and ask your questions. And so when you aggregated all these mechanisms, the website, social media, the telephone town hall together, we got more comments this year than we did the previous 25 years combined. And so we have a pretty good idea, a better idea of what our constituents want. And in our case, they don't like potholes. They don't like those red lights at night when they're red and there's nobody else around. Why can't I go? And then they want a better BART. It's our transit system, main transit system here in the Bay Area. And then lastly, they wanted a first and last mile solution. They want to take transit. They just can't get there. And so a previous question was about our autonomous vehicle program. That really was one of the reasons why we started looking for these various technologies that drive themselves around the world to try to figure out, okay, how do we fix that first and last mile or first and last miles problem? And so we take the input from the public, we try to find solutions, and then what Lindsay does and the team does here is they try to go back out to the media to talk about how we're doing. What's the progress we're making? We have a yearly accomplishment page that we develop on the things that we're doing on the performance criteria for these things like pothole repairs. So almost 20% of our annual sales tax allocation goes out to the local agencies for paving. And so we're keeping track of that to make sure how many lane miles we're paving, how many roads are we fixing in Contra Costa County using that sales tax dollars. That's very important to us and hopefully very important to the voters here in Contra Costa County.
That sounds like a truly innovative way to feel like you have at least the pulse of the people and they have a chance to feel like they were in some part of the process of determining the priorities. What are some of the pitfalls that you see with other leaders, with leaders out there in trying to have a future view? Because that's what I kind of see. You sort of have this true future view. What do you see some of the pitfalls of people that maybe haven't quite gotten there yet?
I think the main issue with leaders is they don't like to take risk. And if you don't like to take risk, then you've got some issues probably with trying to motivate your employees. And so our employees look up to their leaders for guidance, whether it's overt or covert guidance, how you act, how you behave. I think that's really important, how you carry yourself as a leader, so that your employees get a sense that, yes, it's okay to take risk. And then when things happen, if the leader doesn't back the people up, then they're not going to take risk anymore, because generally that's what happens. And so I think that's one of the pitfalls. I think sometimes leaders, like, let's say me, some days I'm in a bad mood and I'm short. I'm curt with the employees. I don't, every question is an important question, but sometimes I don't spend enough time with the employee when they ask a question, and they're not asking me a question because they want to waste my time, but they're asking a question because they really want my advice or my input. And so sometimes, depending on the situation, in my case, I may not be as patient that I should be. And so I think that leads to some problems with trying to be visionary. And then if every time you walk into your boss's office, you have an idea and they don't like it, well, pretty soon they're not going to actually bring any more suggestions into your office. And so there are a lot of reasons why we don't sometimes create a good future. But I think leadership, the thing that I would tell other leaders is it begins with you. Leadership starts at the top. It starts with you, the leader. That's what you signed on for. And so you should try to lead by example. In our case, there's never a dumb idea. We throw a lot of dumb ideas up on the wall, and some don't stick, some stick. And I'll give you an example. It's pretty simple. It's one day I saw this crate of paper coming into our office. I mean, it was very large, probably from Staples. Let's say it's 10 giant boxes of paper. And what's that? That's our paper supply for this next board meeting, this next month. I'm going, my God, how much do we spend on paper? And so I went home and I came up with an acronym called POP, Progress on Paperless, came back the next day and said, we need to implement POP. What do you guys think? They said, okay, let's do that. So we started tracking the paper reduction, which made us call all of the board members and the people that get our paper packets, our agendas, and ask them, do you really want that? Do you need it? And so through that process, initially, we reduced paper usage by 40%. We had a copy machine that used to shake the whole office. It was so large. And on packet day, this thing would just be churning out packets, and the whole office would heat up because this thing was generating a lot of heat. It was the size of a station wagon. And we've gone from that to really a small copy machine now. And I think we've reduced paper by 70%, paper usage from what we had before. But that progress on paperless POP, it actually developed our e-construction program, because Ivan Ramirez, who's our director of construction, came in one day and he said, I'm going online bidding. I said, why do you want to go online bidding? He goes, because there's no paper. And we're also counting the paper that other people produce, send in to us. And I said, okay, let's do online bidding. And so then our board clerk, she came in and said, we need to do electronic signatures. Why do we need to do electronic signatures? She said, then we don't have to have any paper. Now we have electronic signatures. Then we went to e-inspection. So all of our inspection is done using tablets. So there's no more paper. We don't type anything. And then ultimately, our plans and specifications are now stored in the cloud. So if you want 12 copies, if Sue Dyer wants 12 copies of our plans and specs, by God, print them out to your heart's content. But we don't print any out anymore. We don't have a plan sheet desk. We don't have any of that. So we're really kind of going totally away from paper. But it all started with this POP, Progress on Paperless, because we didn't, I couldn't see spending all this money on paper. And so it's really kind of grown. And I think that's where people buy into your vision. And all aspects of the organization are now, they're saying, why do I have to send you paper copies of invoices to get reimbursed? And so now it's done electronically.
Yeah. So everybody's popping.
Yeah, everybody's popping. Yes.
So what do you see, as perhaps the future of transportation? I know that you're pretty plugged in here. So what do you kind of see as what's going to be out there in 20 years?
Well, I think autonomous vehicles will help us, as I mentioned before, get to the underserved. But I think that the biggest leap in transportation is going to be data. We have access to so much data that we're going to be able to make better decisions on what road's degrading faster than another, instead of, hey, pave in front of Randy's house because he's the boss. It won't be paving in front of Randy's house because he's the boss. It'll be paving in front of your house because the roadway is degrading faster, and we need to kick in that preservation mode. And if we can get it early enough, we can save a lot of money. We can make better decisions on one of the programs that we're starting here now is mode shift. If you look at a roadway, it's really highly congested, but if you pull the cars away and just look at the occupants, you'd be amazed at how much capacity that road still has. And so how do we better use the existing capacity that we have, whether it's by incentive, it's by motivation? The holiday that we benchmark against is Martin Luther King Day or Columbus Day. Not everybody gets those days off, but the freeways operate perfectly. And so what we want to do is mimic that. How do we then share rides? How do we get into shared mobility? Well, all these things are going to happen in the near future because of better access to data and that little smartphone device that we have that we're trying, at least here at CCTA, we're trying to figure out ways of how do we leverage a smartphone? How do we leverage data? How do we get better information to the traveling public? How do we incentivize mode shift? How do we utilize technology to make our transportation system more effective, greener, and safer?
That sounds really, really awesome for everyone, not only the people that have to drive every day, but the people that are stuck in traffic. I mean, for those of you who don't deal with that in other parts of the country, other parts of the world. It is a very, very big issue here in the San Francisco Bay Area and some other places too. Seattle has a lot of traffic. There's, certainly Los Angeles does. Certain parts of the East Coast has a lot of traffic. So we need new modes and ways of looking and thinking about traffic. And big data sounds like it's a opportunity. But I'm going to shift a little bit now, Randy. Not everything has always gone perfectly, has always been wonderful. What was your biggest challenge as a leader? Take us back to that exact moment.
I think I've had a lot of challenges in my time in transportation. One of the biggest challenges that I had in transportation was getting the Bay Bridge under construction. I was sent to District 4 from headquarters back in 2001, September 2001. I remember it very well. I was sick. I was actually ill. And 9/11 hit, and we were trying to figure out how to safeguard the 7 toll bridges in the Bay Area, because that morning I remember there were 4 planes. They knew where 3 planes were. They're all headed to the West Coast. And as I was looking out over the landscape of the Bay Area, what target were they going to hit? And immediately I thought about the toll bridges, because they generate a lot of revenue for the Bay Area and they're very important. And so I called Sacramento headquarters and asked them for a $20 million director's order to safeguard our tunnels and our 7 toll bridges. And they asked me what the plan was. And I said, I'll call you tomorrow when I figure it out. I just need approximately $20 million. And I ended up getting that. But that whole Bay Area time was very difficult, because we had all the bridges except for the Antioch and Dumbarton under construction, the new Carquinez Bridge, the new Benicio Martinez Bridge. And as a leader, sometimes you get so many things going on at one time that it's hard to focus in on any one. And so I was always worried about making the right decisions on all the things that were happening in the Bay Area at that time. I was there to put a new management team in place in District 4, Caltrans District 4, fix the outreach with the media, if you can do that, and then at least in District 4. And then I also was asked to get the Bay Bridge under construction, but there was so much more going on. I think sometimes as leaders, how do you focus in on, your prioritization of your issues? How do you make those priority decisions on what's the most important, and then follow through on that? Because I was always worried about that, not paying attention to all the details that I needed to pay attention to.
That's a very interesting perspective. It's kind of for so many leaders, it's sort of the pressure of the job that occurs. I see that with other people that I know that are in very responsible positions. But there's a lot of good advice in there too. Just you got to keep plowing ahead and make it happen. So advice. What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
I've actually gotten a lot of advice. I'm a product of a lot of mentorship over the years, at least in transportation. And I tell people that in the old days, the mentorship was applied differently than it probably is today, where in the old days, there was a lot of probably raised voices and closed door sessions, at least for me, because I used to ask a lot of questions and many of them were dumb. But I had, once again, mentors that would actually spend time and explain things to me. And I think that I'll tell you a couple of pieces of advice if I could. One is I walked into my boss's office, Lee Dieter, and I gave him this report. And he asked me who did this report. And I said, I did. And he thumbed through it and he said, this is a very, very good report. Please, can you close the door for me? I said, sure. So I closed the door. And I really thought that this was going to be a accolades in private situation. And it turned out it was no accolades. It was, you realize you have, 6,000 employees that can actually do this work for you. And you're supposed to get the most out of your people and so on and so forth. He said, what do you think I pay you for? And you pay me to work hard. You pay me to put 8 hours in, so on and so forth. He goes, no, I pay you to think. I want you to take 5 to 10 minutes out of the day and think about the future. Assume nobody else is. Think about how do you become more efficient? How do you make your team more efficient? How do you make things better? And I think that was a very good piece of advice for me. And since this is a construction related podcast, I would say in 1988, I became a resident engineer. I just mentioned this in an award ceremony that I had the other night. And so for those that heard it before, I apologize. But Bob Waddington was a construction manager or construction engineer for District 6 back in 1988. There was only one senior transportation engineer in all of District 6 managing all of construction. And I was in design at the time when I got registered. And I fully assumed that I was going to be a design branch chief. I was going to have a design squad. And when they called in my name and said, Randy Iwasaki, you're going to construction, I said, hey, I don't want to go to construction. And so I was called into Bob Waddington's office, and he closed the door and he explained that if you want to move up at Caltrans, you need to be a resident engineer. You need to have experience managing contractors, dealing with contracts, dealing with money, dealing with legislators, dealing with the front office, dealing with headquarters. It'll help you achieve your long range goals of getting promoted. And I said, listen, I only want to make $3,000 a month, because at the time I was making $1,471 a month. And I figured if I could double my salary, I'd be the richest guy on the planet, because I lived at home. My mom used to wash my shirts, and I'd have 5 orange shirts and 5 pairs of Levi's washed. I get home, dinner's on the table. And I worked so many hours, I didn't have time to spend any money. So I figured if I could double my salary, I'd be set for life. And he said, no, that's not true. You're going to need more, blah, blah, blah. And so I said, okay, I'll do it. I'll be a resident engineer. So they sent me to Visalia. But on the way out, he said, let me give you a last piece of advice. I said, okay. He said, it's okay for a contractor to make money on your projects. They bid a project with a profit, and it's okay. It's not a mark of shame that your projects end up, you don't have any claims. You're not fighting the contractor. You guys work together and you deliver the projects. I said, well, thank you. That's great advice. And I've used that advice ever since. And if you look at the programs that we have at CCTA, a lot of them are designed to minimize risk. We hire, so we have a staff of 20, but we hire people that have actually worked for a contractor to be our owner's representatives. So we have 2, Jim Reed and Chris Cole, and they go out and they work as CCTA employees with our CM firms to make sure that things are being delivered correctly. And then they also go in to take a look at plans at 65% to see if there's any errors. And we're going to implement a BIM-like program here where we can catch conflicts early in the design process so we can eliminate those. We pay our contractors in 5 working days or less after the invoices are approved. We do that to minimize risk so they know they're going to get paid, and hopefully the subcontractors get paid very, very quickly as well, because if we can do it, certainly the primes can do it as well. And so everything that we do is trying to minimize risks so that when a contractor bids our work, we're a partnering agency, and we take that very seriously. They know what they're going to get. And so it seems like with this programs that we've implemented, partnering and others, paying very, very quickly, our bids we're getting more bidders, and bidder compaction. The previous bid, I think the difference between the low bidder and the second bidder was like $33,000. And this last interchange project, we got a bidder from Los Angeles. And so I think these things are working. So the advice that I got many, many years ago, this is like 31 years ago now, is still relevant today. And so I try to use these little pieces of advice that I've gotten and implement those, and they've worked for me over the years. And so I wanted to thank those old Caltrans mentors that I had, Jim Roberts and Bob Waddington, Dick Weaver, Bob Coleman, Lee Dieter, and others, because they really taught me they gave me some sage advice, and I've not forgotten that.
And now you've given it to Construction Nation. So thank you.
You're welcome.
So we always like to have each guest provide a resource. It could be a book that you like, a link, an article, another podcast. What is it that you would like to share with Construction Nation?
There's actually 2 things I'd like to share. One, TED Talks. I like the TED Talk series. There's some really relevant TED Talk sessions that you might like as a listener, to just kind of listen to what other people do to motivate and lead and things like that. But what's interesting is somebody gave me the book Jobs, it was Steve Jobs' biography. And so I read it every now and again. It's a really thick book, but every time I read it, the team will go, "Did you read the Jobs book again?" Because I'll talk about, we need rounded corners. I want it this way. It needs to fit into the community. We need to fact check this. We need to redevelop this. And we're not settling unless it's right. And so the book, I read it every now and again. It's a long read, but I like it because the guy really changed the world. And so every now and then when we're recruiting, I'll say, "Do you want to sell flavored water or do you want to change the world?" And it seems to work every now and again to recruit the best, at least here. And so I use the Jobs book and his philosophy many times.
That's cool. And we will put a link to that book in the session notes, the episode notes, so everybody can grab that off of Amazon. So how can Construction Nation get in contact with you?
Well, my email address, riwasaki@ccta.net, and I have a LinkedIn account that is used pretty heavily. And those are probably two of the best ways of getting a hold of me. And I also have a Twitter account, Iwasaki2.
We will put those in the session notes as well. So parting advice. What parting advice do you have for the listeners for something they could do tomorrow to start creating a future view or vision for their team?
I think that the advice that I got from Lee Dieter was very important about taking 5 minutes out of your day and thinking about the future. Your vision for the future is going to be different than my vision for the future. The vision is probably pretty set for whoever's view, whatever seat you sit in. But the point is that test the theory that if you can see a future and you want to get to that future, how do you talk to your employees about that future and how do you get buy-in? I mean, that's what you can start doing immediately, is thinking about the future, coming up with a vision, and then seeing if your employees like that vision as well.
That sounds very sage. Thank you, Randy. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences, your expertise with Construction Nation. We're so appreciative for you taking time out of your very busy schedule to be here. So Construction Nation, remember, dream teams don't just happen. They're built one step at a time. Why not send out this episode to your entire team so they can start thinking about the future and maybe creating a vision that you could co-create? The more people you have helping you, the faster you can build your construction dream team. You can't have your dream until you build your team. Please head on over to constructiondreamteam.com to sign up for our newsletter. And don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher. Remember that Construction Dream Team drops every Monday morning at 4 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So please join me next week when I will interview Roddy Boga, Senior Vice President of RS&H, on creating your personal brand so they love you. Roddy is always great, so make sure you tune in for that. Thank you so much for joining me today on this episode with Randy, and thank you so much, Randy, for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
I'll catch you next time, Construction Nation. Have a great week.